Hey guys, this is Mitch with Fine.CGI, and today we're going to talk about the basics of how to do server-side scripting for Nakama and creating custom modules in Lua for Nakama. And we're going to do this by building a basic trading system that is server-side. So it's going to be relatively secure. It's going to have some input validation, things like that. So it's going to be a really good primer to get you to where you need to go. So first, we're going to talk about how Nakama server-side scripting works and how custom modules operate. And then we're going to go in and actually build out the trading system. So we're going to, build out a quick inventory thing where we can add items to inventory. We're going to talk about how to create a trade offer. Then we're going to talk about how to accept a trade offer. And then we're going to go into how to cancel that trade offer and things like that. So that's what I have in store for you guys today. So let's go ahead and get started. All right. So the first thing we have to talk about is basically what Nakama modules are. So basically, Nakama modules are a way for us to have custom code out on the Nakama side. So if we go out and we actually run our Nakama modules, so if you come into Docker here and you actually run your Nakama module, we can actually see where our modules are, because I actually shut down my Docker instance since my last tutorial. So we'll go ahead and kick that bad boy off. And then I'm going to go ahead and open up my Brave browser here. We'll bring this guy over here and say 127.001.7351. And then we're going to log in under our admin account like normal. Now you'll see right here, there's a thing called runtime modules. And basically what these are custom functions. So you can have Go modules, Lua modules, and JavaScript modules. Now, in this tutorial, we're just going to make a Lua module. And the reason why is because Lua is a really easy language and it's kind of similar to GDScript. So it translates relatively well if you at least have a base understanding of GDScript. So we'll be using Lua for this tutorial. Now, how are modules set up? Well, inside of Nakama, underneath the Nakama server, where your Docker composes, there is a modules folder right here. And this is where your module is going to be held. Now, we first need to kind of talk about how all this operates. So what I'm going to do is right click new, and I'm going to go ahead and create a text document. Now I'm going to call this trade system dot, I believe Lua is LUA instead of dot text. And we're going to hit enter and change its extension. That's totally fine. Now I'm going to double click on this guy. Now I'm going to go into my Nakama server tutorial, CMD. We'll go code, this didn't come in here, so code space dot, and that's going to open up VS Code in that directory. And that's basically just going to allow us to have a bit more space here to work from. So you can see we have our docker compose.yaml right here, and that has all of our information right here. And then we have our modules, which is our trade system.lua. Now, something to keep in mind is when you want to work in Lua, if you have the Lua extension, so if you type LUA, you should see the Lua server extension right here. This is a pretty popular one that a lot of people seem to like. It has some of the most downloads, the highest ratings, things like that. So I suggest you guys pull this down. One of the unfortunate parts about Lua coding is when you're doing it in here, we don't have access to the actual Nakama library. We can just say requires Nakama, but unfortunately, since it doesn't actually have the library built in, we don't have linting. So we just kind of have to know what we're looking for, which is kind of unfortunate, but it is a thing. And of course, if anybody knows anything more than me about this, please let me know, because it's something that I've been searching for, but I couldn't quite find. So let's go into this Lua section here. So when we add a module into our Nakama inside of here, when we do our Docker compose, it's going to load this in and it's going to create that module, right? So it's going to add in that function. So what we need to do is we need to first create a function to actually use all of this stuff. So first things first, I'm going to create a local, and a local is basically a var inside of Godot. So basically Lua local means var. So if you want to make that distinction in your brain, we'll say nk is equal to require, and I'm going to require quote Nakama. Now, unfortunately, right, we're not going to just fetch that node module and have linting, because unfortunately it just doesn't work that way. We would need to find the Nakama module, but since everything's built in, we'd have to go pull the source code and do a lot of stuff to get it. So we'll just kind of stick with what we have here. Now, what I'm going to do is I'm going to say function like this, and I'm going to pass in the title, which is going to be ping. And then I'm going to pass in context, comma, and then payload. Now, inside of the Nakama stuff, you have the context and the payload. Context is all of your session information. So anything like your username, user ID, stuff like that. And payload is any data that you need. So if there's any special data that you need to have, for instance, if you need to pass in like item information or player information, that is where this can come in. So now what you can do is you can come in here and write and return data. So in my case, what I'm going to do is I'm going to do something really, really simple. We're just going to print something out, and we're just going to return true, basically. So we'll go nk dot logger underscore info quote received payload, like that, and then we'll return quote pong, like that. This is basically going to teach us the very basics of how all this works. And now we need to register that RPC function. So nk dot register RPC, like that. And then we'll add in ping, comma, and then we're going to need to matrix it to something. So typically you would matrix it to something that you want it to be named. So we'll say ping, like that. And that's really all we need to do. So now if we go into this Nakama server tutorial, we shut down our server. So we'll kill this guy. So stop it, like so. We'll say docker compose up, like so. It's going to go ahead and create and run our new Docker image. Thankfully, it's basically just going to be keeping all of our data, doing all the things as you would expect, but it will allow us to get that new module. So now if we go into our Nakama, we refresh, you'll see Lua modules, trade system right here. And we have a Lua RPC function ping. If we go to API Explorer, you can actually see that we can actually send this request. So we need to set user ID as request context. So we need to fetch out an account. So let's just pull this user ID, and we will go into runtime modules, API Explorer, paste, send request. And unfortunately, unexpected token P in Pong is not valid JSON. So we have something wrong with our module, it looks like. So let's take a look at what our module looks like. And it's such a simple module, I could not imagine that it would have much of an issue here. But let me see. Function ping. It says it returns a string as expected, so that's fine. Payload, payload. And my guess is because this is not returning valid JSON data, it's probably mad. So we'll say nk JSON underscore encode, like that. And we'll just JSON encode this. And we'll go quote bracket data is equal to Pong bracket, like that. And now we'll go ahead and refresh this really quick. So boop, we'll kill that. It actually looks like it might not need us to reset this. I'm curious if the trade system Lua actually hot reloads. So we could try that later and see if it does. But let's go ahead and take a look at Nakama controller. We'll refresh. We will paste that thing, send a request, and you'll see we get back our data Pong. If we take a look here, you can see that it actually logs here our received payload right here, recipient ID. So we know that we called that function correctly. So that's how we can actually register that module within our project. And now, what if we want to actually call it from Godot? Well, that's where things get kind of fun. So first things first, I'm going to clean this up a tiny bit just because there's not a lot of space here. So we'll get rid of that because I don't need that for now. And I think we'll need friends for later, but we can hide this panel here. So let's hide that. And let's move this panel up over here. That's just going to give us a lot more space because right now we're really running short on space. I'm going to drag this guy up here. So now we're just kind of up and over. So we're just out of everybody's way. Now, I don't know if we're going to need this chat either. So let's hide that and let's create a new panel. So we'll right click, add a child object. We'll say panel like that. And I'm going to call this trade system because you'd think that I would have renamed these guys earlier, but I never did. So we'll get started on that. So we'll make this nice and large. And what I'm going to do is right click, add a child node. Let's add in a button. Now, what we need to do is come in and say ping RPC. And basically all this is going to do is it's going to give us the basic understanding of how all this works. So we'll copy this, paste, and we will go ahead and do that. We're going to come in here, double click on button down and connect it. Now, when we do our connection, let's go ahead and do a bunch of % signs and say RPC trade system like that. That just kind of gives us an idea of what this stuff is. So that way, when we're scrolling through this, we're not lost, if that makes sense. Now, when we want to do an RPC, it's actually really, really easy. Thankfully, they make it actually relatively simple. All we have to do is first stringify whatever data we want to send, which in our case, if we look at our Lua script, there's not a whole lot here. We're not reading any of this data, right? So we don't need to worry about that. We're just calling the stuff. So I'm not worried about stringifying that data. All we got to do is just send our asynchronous call. So we can say var RPC return is equal to await client dot RPC async, and we'll pass in our session like so. Now, if we take a look, you can see PID is string, P payload variant is null. So what that means is we need to call in an ID. Now, if you look at this, that is this value right here. So we'll copy this because we registered that as our ID. So we can come in here, paste, comma, and then what data do we want to put in? In our case, we kind of just want to pass in empty, right? So we'll just pass in a empty object. Now we probably will need to JSON stringify that. So I think what I'll do is I'll pass in some garbage data just because I don't want to mess with causing issues here. So we'll say JSON, because we'll readjust this anyway later to make it so that way we can actually pass in, lots of data. But we'll just do this really simple. So we'll do that, quote, test, test, like that. And now if we hit play, in theory, well, actually what we should do beforehand is we should print out our results. So print RPC return, and I'm going to drop a breakpoint here. So that way we can just check out our data. So we'll hit play. It's going to refresh, and then we're going to submit. We're going to sign in like normal, and then we're going to hit ping RPC. You'll see we hit a breakpoint. So what came back? Well, if we take a look at our RPC return here, we have HTTP key null, 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 payload is null. So it must have failed. So here is our exception. RPC function is not found. So that's not a great sign, but at least we're getting back something rather than nothing. So let's see what we're missing here. So did our RPC successfully come in here? Do we see any information in here? Do we see any information in here? So if we go to our runtime modules, we do have our trade system. We do have a Lua function called ping, and we are calling it here. So that's okay. We take a look at our trade system. we are registering that RPC function called ping. So I figured out what was going on. So in the previous tutorial, we changed this to our non-local host. So we need to change it back to localhost. So 127.0.0.1. And then we can go ahead and try it now. So my guess is that's probably where it blew up. So we'll sign in and we'll click ping. And then let's see what our return is. So we'll come down here to our RPC return. And you can see that our payload is Pong. So that was what it was. It wasn't because we actually made a mistake with our code. It's just because we were pointed at the wrong thing. So that was what was causing it. Awesome. So that's basically how we can create our own custom modules. So if you only wanted to learn like the very, very basics in the nucleus of the tutorial, then you pretty much are good to go from this point. Now we're going to kind of transition into the trading system, right? Into building an actual system and, working with some of the storage systems of Nakama and things like that. Hey guys, Editor Mitch here. So let's go ahead and actually plan this out a tiny bit before we start executing it, because if I don't explain how things work, it can get a little bit confusing. So basically what we're going to do is we're first going to build out a get inventory system, right? And all that's going to do is it's going to have the ability to add something to our inventory. And the way adding stuff to our inventory is going to work is basically we'll grab item details, and then we'll go ahead and send that up to our Nakama server. And then on the Nakama server side, we're going to get that data, and then we're basically going to commit it to the database. That's basically going to be the workflow for this specific feature. Now, when it comes to getting our inventory, all we're going to do is we're going to pass in our ID, and then we are going to get that ID and then just select. We're going to go in and then we're going to select objects under the collection inventory and with the player user ID. That's going to basically allow us to handle just our information. We don't want to pull other people's information. We only want our inventory. So that's more or less how that feature is going to work. Now, when it comes to how our trading system is going to work, how it's going to operate is pretty simple. We're basically going to select get users inventory, get target users inventory, like that. And then we're going to select whatever it is that we want traded. Then we're going to come in here and we're going to send that data to our Nakama server. Then we're going to come in here and then we're going to commit that trade to the other user's inventory, trade offers. And then we'll come in here and we'll basically end. So basically that's how we'll send our trades out, if that makes sense. Now, much like how our inventory is going to work, it's going to work the same way we want to get our trade offers. We'll just get our ID, get our stuff like this, and then we'll basically just select the trade offers like that. And we'll basically just return that. And then when we want to accept a trade offer, that's when things is going to get really interesting. So basically, when we want to accept a trade offer, all we have to do is we have to come in here and get our objects from our sender, get objects from our receiver, and then flip the item's user account, which technically is just a storage record. So really I should just say user account, it's assigned to, and then basically commit that data. Now, the goal is to basically make this as secure as possible. So we're going to make sure that everything is handled by the server side if we can. So much like how the trading system works, where we get the user's inventory, the user tells us what they want to trade for, and then it saves it out onto the Nakama server. We're going to try to do the same thing. We're going to try to house all that data over there, and we're going to also house what the trade offer is going to be. And when the user selects people's stuff, we're actually just sending the item information across. So it's not necessarily and so that's basically how this is all going to work. Now, it's not necessarily the best way to do a trading system, but it is a decent way to do it without making it really complicated. So I think that this should work for what we need, and I think it should be relatively simple. So with that being said, let's go ahead and build this. So in order for us to make a trading system, we need to actually set up some kind of way to add items to our inventory. So we're going to build that out first. So basically, in order to add items to our inventory, we'll just take over this little function here. Instead of ping, we'll just say add item to inventory. And what we'll do is we'll come in here and we'll go ahead and basically set up adding an item. So first things first, we'll say local, and then we'll say user underscore ID is equal to context dot user underscore ID. Now we also need to get our item data. Now this is not the best way to handle this. Technically speaking, the way I'm going to handle this is I'm just going to create the item if it doesn't exist, and then we're just going to go from there. But in reality, what we should do is we should preload our database with items and then basically associate IDs with those items. So that way it all stays on the server side. It's not handled by the actual local client, because then people can cheat. So it basically makes it a lot harder for people to cheat, if that makes sense. But I'm just going to go ahead and do our own thing here. So nk.json decode, and we'll pass in our payload like that. Now you'll notice that I'm going to do this a lot inside of this code base. In general, we're going to have these three very, very, very common. It's going to happen in a lot of our functions. So I'm going to do local item underscore ID. And then I'm going to create a function called contact. And then I'm going to go ahead and store my user ID. So I'm going to say local user ID is equal to context dot user ID. And it'll probably be user underscore ID. I believe that's what Nakama uses. And then we'll say local item data is equal to nk.json decode, DECODE, like that, and then payload like that. And then local item ID is equal to nk.uuidv4, like that. And that will pass in a randomized GUID for our item ID. And now we need to define some kind of item object. So I'm going to say local and item is equal to bracket, and then we'll say ID is equal to item ID, comma, name is going to be equal to item data dot name, type is going to be equal to item data dot type, and then we'll add in a rarity as well. That's not really necessary, but it's just something that we can do. It'll make it a little bit different. We'll say rarity is equal to item data dot rarity, like that. Now we're going to need to actually write the item to our storage. So in order to write an item to a storage, it's actually pretty easy. We're going to define a storage object. So we'll say local storage object, and we'll make that be equal to an object. And we'll say collection is equal to, and we're going to make a collection called inventory. Now, one of the things that I didn't explain super well is what a collection is. And a collection is just a folder, okay? And so think of it kind of like a table. It's a really good place where we can select and disseminate our information, if that makes sense. So we'll say key is equal to item ID, comma, user ID is equal to user ID. And we'll want to do user underscore ID. Nakama prefers underscores. So I'm going to say value is equal to item, and then we should be good to go. Now, once we have that item created, because this is going to be all of our data, right? for our actual thing. So these are all required for our storage object to work properly. You need to define what collection it is. You need to define the key of that collection. And then you need to identify the user ID that's associated with that information. And as long as the user ID is unique and the key is unique inside the user ID, then we're good to go. So basically, if we come in here and we do something like, let's say, inventory, and then we have a item ID of 1, and then we have a user ID of 10. So let's say 10, and then the item itself, then that's how we know that this is going to be unique. So as long as, and I guess that's technically a bad thing to say here because it's technically collection, then user ID, then key, then item. And as long as down in these folders, these guys are unique, we're good to go. So if we were to establish an item that was dash dash, if I actually just duplicate this, copy paste, if this goes to 2, that's valid, right? Because they're different user IDs. So this key can be the same as this key. It's not going to hurt nothing. But if this is 1, then this has to be unique. So this is valid. So that's basically how the collection key system works inside of Nakama. And I believe I explained this before, but I just thought it would be good to run through it again, give you guys a refresher really quick. And then we'll just do nk.storage right, and we're going to pass in that storage object like that. And then we'll just go ahead and instead of returning nk JSON encoded data is equal to Pong, we'll just pass in our item ID and we'll pass back our item ID like that. And then we'll go ahead and register this. So we'll register and we'll register. And then that should just work. So now if we go into our command prompt here, we can say Docker compose up. And that's going to go ahead and create a Docker compose, although it is unhappy. So let me ls really quick, or dir, I guess, because I'm using Windows. That should work. During error, Docker daemon is not running. So we'll open up Docker desktop and we'll get that to run really quick. There we go. And then we will run Docker compose up. It's going to go ahead and reset our server. And then we should see when we reload, we're going to go admin password, and you'll see that this boots up just fine. Then we'll go into our runtime modules. You'll see our add item to inventory exists, and we are good to go. So we'll come into our scene here, and we'll come down here. Instead of doing this ping RPC button, we're just going to go ahead and create our little function call. So we'll come in here. We'll grab add item to inventory. We're going to paste that in here. And then we'll create an object. So we'll say var item is equal to bracket bracket quote. And if you look, we basically just need this information here. So we need item type ID and rarity. So we'll just paste. And we don't need ID. We just need name, type, and rarity, right? Because our ID gets generated. So we'll just do that. So we'll go name, type, and rarity like so. And for our item name, we'll say something like sword. For our type, we'll say weapon. And for our rarity, we will say common, like that. And now we'll take this JSON stringify and we'll go ahead and pass an item. And that's basically going to send that up to get added to our inventory. So we'll hit play, and then we'll go ahead and log in and we'll hit ping. Now you'll see we receive back an item ID right here. See that? So that means that it successfully did what we needed to do. So if we go to our Nakama console, we go out to storage, you will see under the collection inventory, we have a key name right here and we have a user ID right here. So if we click on that, you can see if I format this, here is our weapon. It has everything that we put in there. So if we ever want to expand this, we absolutely can. We can come in here and we can just add to this little Lua script here. add the parameters that we want, and then we can go into our Godot code here and go ahead and add that stuff. So that's really cool. And that's the first step to us getting a good trading system going. So now the question is, okay, so we can add objects. How do we get those objects? Because if you wanted to pull it via storage, you could just do it right here inside of here. If we scroll up, there should be, let's see, storage. Right here, you can see that we have read storage objects, and you can see that we're just pulling back our save games. So really, we could just pull this back like this. It's up to you guys on how you guys want to handle it. You know, it's the same thing with putting objects in when we have this little thing right here where we pass in our saved game data. It's the exact same thing. Do we want the client to have that control or do we not? And it's completely up to you guys. Now, I want to show you guys how to select data from Lua so that way you guys understand how to do it on the other end. It's going to be a lot easier for us to work through it on that end because it's going to provide us a bit more security, right? It's a bit more in our hands versus in the client's hands. So we'll come down here and so we'll say function like so. And for the function name, we'll just say get inventory like that. We'll pass in context, comma, payload, and we'll go ahead and basically pull back our data. So we'll say local user ID is equal to context.user ID, like so. And then local data is equal to nk.json decode, and we'll say payload, like that. And that'll pull back our data. Now we can just go ahead and list our storage data. So we'll say local results is equal to nk.storage list, and we'll pass in our data.id, comma, quote, inventory, comma, 100, comma, nil, like that. Now, you might be wondering what these guys are for. So basically how this works is this is the user ID. This is the collection associated with that user ID. This is going to be the number of objects we're going to return. And then this is the actual cursor for that. So it gives us basically everything that's in their inventory. That's kind of what this is for. So it'll allow us to pull back the top 100 items in their inventory and then go from there. And of course, you can make this as big or as small as you want. And you can always pass in a cursor. And a cursor allows you to kind of move it around so that way you can page data back and forth if you need to. But in our case, we'll just go with 100 because we should never need to go higher than that. Then we'll say local inventory is equal to new object, like that. And we'll say for underscore obj in I pairs result, like that, do, and we're going to do a do while loop. Now, what we're doing here is we're basically saying for this key object pair in I pairs. So when we return our stuff, we're going to have a object pair here, and we're going to loop through that object pair in our results table, right? And then we're going to create a new table. So we'll say table.insert inventory, comma, obj.value, like that. And what this is going to do is it's going to take inventory, which is a object, right? And we're going to table insert that data. So you can see here, this is like a unpacked table almost, is as far as I could tell. So what we're doing is we're saying table.insert into this object. So we're basically creating a list of objects effectively. And then we're going to go ahead and say nk.json encode, and we're going to pass back our inventory like that. And it's going to be that easy. So that's basically how we're going to do our get inventory. So now I can just copy this. I can copy this, paste, and there we go. And that should allow us to set up our get inventory to just basically work for us. So now we're over on the Godot side. All we need to do is come into here, scroll down to the bottom, and let's go ahead and duplicate this. So Control C, Control V. We're going to change this from ping RPC to add item to inventory. I'm going to drag this guy out and I'm going to say get inventory. And I think I spelled inventory wrong. Like that. And I'm going to copy and Control A, get inventory, like that. Now I'm going to hook this guy up. So I'm going to right click, disconnect, right click, connect, and I'm going to go ahead and hook it up to this guy right here. Now I'm going to do some pre-coding because I already know how I want to structure this. So what I'm going to do is create a function, get inventory, and I'm going to pass in an ID like that. And then I'm going to tell this to get inventory, and I'll pass in my session.user ID like that. And then I'll come in here, and when I want to get my inventory, I need to fetch back all that stuff, right? So I'm going to need to do an RPC call, kind of like what we did up here. It's almost exactly what we did up here, just slightly different. So what we'll do is we'll say var result is equal to await client dot RPC async, and we'll pass in our session like so, comma, our ID, right? So we get to pass in what ID of RPC we want to do. So we'll do get inventory. So quote, get inventory, comma, and then we'll pass in our data, JSON dot stringify, and we'll pass in an object here. So we'll pass in bracket, quote, ID, colon, ID, just like that. And then we're basically going to take that result and we're going to more or less use it for whatever we need. So I'm going to go ahead and say var inventory is equal to JSON dot parse string, and I will pass in my result. That's going to basically give me back an object. So then I'm going to return our object. So we'll just pass in inventory like that. And now I can basically just go print this data here. And that should give us back all of the data that we could possibly need. Now it'll say parse error function is a coroutine, must be called with await. So await get inventory. Let's see if that will work. There we go. We're going to refresh that really quick, and then we'll just log in, get inventory. And it is mad. So let's take a look at our result. So what is our result object? You can see we got an exception. So that's not good, but that's okay. RPC function is not found. And when you see the RPC as function is not found, what that means is that we need to actually reset our trade system.lua here. So we'll come in here, Control C, we'll stop it, and we'll run it. And that's going to reload those modules so that way we can actually update our modules. So now if I come in here, in theory, this should work. So we'll hit play, we'll hit submit, and then we'll go ahead and say get inventory. And it's still mad because we must still have an exception. Well, we did get an exception, so that's good. But our result is an object. Our payload, so it's going to be result.payload. At the end of the day, it will be result.payload. But it didn't come back with any data. So result.payload, like that. But it didn't come back with a payload. So I feel like something went wrong here. So let's double check, make sure that we have everything assigned to the proper user ID. So B3, B7, let's take a look at our accounts. B3, B7 right here. It's going to be this guy right here. What authentication do we have? Test at Gmail with password. So that should be fine. Let's see if we take a look at our get inventory session.user ID, client.await result, get inventory, stringify ID is ID. So that's going to work just fine. What is our ID? B3, B7. So it should pull back this object, no problem. So that means that there's a possibility something's blowing up on our Nakama side. So let's see. If we take a look at our logs here, you'll see error reading message from client UUID SID read TCP timeout. So I'm guessing that this is going to be our Lua code being unhappy with us. So let's take a look at it. So we're pulling back a context and a payload. We're decoding that payload and we're doing data.id. We did lowercase id. What did we do here? If we take a look, it is lowercase id, so that's fine. So that should be acceptable because these two match. This is decoding that data as JSON. This is going to be JSON data, so this should be acceptable. We're doing get inventory. It is get inventory, so that should work. And data.id inventory. Let's make sure that that's correct. Inventory. Yep, that's correct. Nil. And then we're passing this into our inventory and then we're encoding that data, but we're not returning the data. That's my fault. We'll say return nk JSON encode inventory like that. And then we're going to go in and basically reset this guy. So Control C, and it's going to take a while to stop because it's got to write everything and shut everything down properly. And then we'll hit up Docker Compose. We're going to let this run. There we go. We'll come in here, hit play, and then we'll submit get inventory, and you'll see that now we have our object just like that. So that's how we can store data into Nakama and how we can take data out of Nakama using Lua, right? So we can actually pull our data and have control over our data. And now we have to create the actual trade offer. So when somebody wants to do a trade offer, what they need to do is they need to basically say, hey, here are the items I want to send you. And then here are what are the items I'm requesting from you. And then we need to kind of store that somewhere. So basically what we're going to do is we're going to create a separate storage, kind of like how we did for inventory here. We're going to do the same thing, but for trade offers. So we'll come in here and we'll say function, and we'll go ahead and say create trade offer like that. And then we'll pass in context, comma, payload like that. And now, much like before, what we'll do is we'll basically just get our user ID here like this. So I'm just going to grab this bit here, copy it. We'll just bring this guy down here. So we'll have our user ID, our data, and then we'll have our offer ID like that. And now we're going to create a trade offer. So we'll say local trade offer is equal to bracket bracket offer ID is equal to offer ID, comma, sender ID is equal to our user ID. And we'll need to make sure that matches up like so. Then we'll send in a receiver ID like so. And we'll make that equal to our data.receiver ID offer items, and we're going to make that equal to data.offer items like so. And then we're going to do requested items, and we'll make that equal to data.requested items. And then we'll go ahead and do status. We'll make that equal to quote pending. Now you could make this whatever you want, and technically we could probably do like an integer or something to make it a little bit, better off, but I'm going to do a magic string for now. I know magic strings are not exactly great, but for right now, it should be fine. So I'm going to put in capital I for all of these guys like so. And there we go. Now, when it comes to writing that object, much like we did before, we have that little local storage objects, right? We're going to need to do the exact same thing. So we'll do local storage object, right? And for our collection, we'll go trade offers like that. For our key, it's going to be our offer ID. For our user ID, it's going to be user ID. It's going to be data.receiver ID. And then for value, we're going to go ahead and pass in our trade offer like that. And then we're going to go ahead and write that. So nk.storage write like that. And I'm going to pass in that object. So bracket, bracket, storage object. And then we'll return nk.json encode, and we'll pass back that offer ID. Like that. And that's going to pass back a nice little object that'll just tell us what the offer ID is. And from here, we can basically use this to create that offer. Now, for us to be able to create an offer, we're going to need to actually come up with some way to select stuff to be traded. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to come in here. And when we get our inventory here, I'm going to want to loop through all of that data. So I'm going to say var inventory is equal to this guy right here. And if we want to, we could actually just do something. And if we want to, we could make this into a variable that exists like out in a game manager or something like that, so we know what our current inventory is. But I'm going to leave that here for right now. So what we can do is we can come into our trade system here, and we'll right click add a child node. We'll add in a panel, and I'm going to go ahead and make it about this big, give or take. I'm going to right click add a child node. We'll add in a VBox container. We'll make it about this big, give or take. There we go. And then I'm going to duplicate it and pull it down like this. Now you'll see that I have these two containers right here. And that's basically going to be where all of our stuff is going to be located. Now, again, if you guys want to make this scalable, you'll need to add scroll containers and things like that just to make it all work. But in our case, I'm just going to make it this simple because it's nice and easy. So what I'll do is I'll come back to my script and I'll say for I in inventory bracket, and we'll go ahead and basically add a button into our VBox container with that information. So I'm going to go in here and say var button is equal to button.new like that. And that's going to spawn in a new button for us. And then I'm going to say button.name is equal to, and if we take a look at our Nakama console here, and we go out to our storage and we take a look at our inventory, we format this guy, you'll see that it's .name. So we'll say I.name like that. And then I will go $VBox container trade system panel VBox container dot add child, and I will add in my child for this VBox container. So I'll say button like that. And in theory, that should just work for us. So now if I hit play, in theory, that should spawn everything right here. So when I log in, get inventory, I do get a button. It looks like it's way too tiny though for what I need it to be. Because if I look at my remote here, it probably has it, but the text itself is not correct. So we're going to need to update that. Yeah, the name is correct, but the text is not. So I'm going to come in here and I'll add in a button.text is equal to I.name like that. Then we'll refresh that and we'll go ahead and submit, get inventory, and there it is. Now, something else that we can do to help make this pretty decent looking, or at least somewhat more reasonable looking, is I can right click add a child node, add in another panel, and I can make it be a part of, be the right size for this VBox container. And you'll see that when we do that, it's going to kind of make everything a little bit darker. See? So that way it's a little bit easier to see who is who. And then I could just right click add a child node, add in some text, edit, and put other user, add in a label, and then put other user, and we can make this into something else if we'd like, but I'm just going to use this for right now. And then I'm going to duplicate this label and pull it up like this. And then I'm going to grab this label and I'm going to name it friend name label. That way I have some kind of label I can work with. And then I'll just say my inventory like that. And that just gives us a way to visually see what this is going to look like. And I feel like I kind of want to maybe make this a little bit bigger, grab this panel and just kind of pull this panel down. So that way it at least looks somewhat reasonable here. There we go. And now when we click on this and we go ahead and hit submit, get inventory, you can see our stuff right here. Now you'll notice that these guys need to be pulled down. So that way they're at the top of it. So that way you can actually select this object, because the way Godot renders is from top to bottom. So these guys are rendering on top of these guys, because if these guys are on top, they'll render below it and then you won't be able to interact with it. So that's basically why we have to move that. So now what we can do is we can come in here and basically when we click get friends, if you remember, we created a section in here in our friends. So if I hit submit, get friends, it's supposed to get my friends. And apparently I have no friends. So I probably need to create a second test and then add that person as my friend. So if I come in here and do test 2, submit, and then if we take a look at our Nakama console accounts, we don't have any usernames or display names. So if we look at authentication, this is test 2. So I'm going to just say test 2 and test 2 like that, just because it's going to make things a little bit easier for us to work with. And then test and test like that. And that'll just make things just a little bit easier for us to see and work with. And now I'm going to go ahead and add as my friend, test, add friend. And then here I'm going to submit test 2 and add as a friend. So that should hopefully make us friends. If I take a look at our friends, we are friends. So that's perfect. So now that we're friends, I'm going to steal some of the button logic here that we did. So if you remember, when we did our button logic, we basically made it so that we could invite our friend and say, I want to invite this person, right? Well, what I'm going to do is I'm going to override that function and get rid of it because I'm showing off a different feature. So we'll just kind of rip that out and work with that. I believe, if I remember correctly, we did a lambda somewhere in the code base right here. So you can see here, we're binding invite to party. So this was to invite a friend on a party. So of course, if you guys want to change how this all operates, I'm going to leave the invite to party code in here, but I'm going to change the text to trade instead. So I'm going to take this, copy, paste, and I'm going to say trade instead. And then I'm going to bind a different function for this guy here. So I will grab this bind, paste it, go like this. And instead of saying on invite to party, I will say on trade bind, and I'll bind I. And now I'm going to go ahead and create the on trade function. So I'm going to come down here and go func on trade like that. And I'm going to pass in I, which I believe is just the ID of the person I'm trading with. And there we go. So if I go back up to the invite, it should be on trade bind I. I is the player itself, i.user.display name. So this is the entire object, not just the ID. So if I look at invite to party, I have friend. So it's going to be friend.user.id. So I'll just copy that, come down here, change this to friend. And we'll go ahead and actually set up our RPC call. So I'm going to paste this so I don't lose it. And I'm going to go ahead and grab my get inventory code right here. Remember how we have get inventory? So what I'm going to do is I'm going to say var inventory is equal to friend.user.id. I'll just say get inventory friend.user.id, and that'll fetch back my friend's inventory. And since it is a coroutine, we need to await. So we'll await. And then I'm going to come in here and I'm basically going to say this exact code. It's literally carbon copy. Bam. Just that. And then what we'll do is we'll say, instead of VBox container, it's just going to be VBox container 2. So now when I select my friend, so if we go test, get friends, trade, it should come back with their data, but it didn't. So that's not great. I feel like there's something I broke here. So let me see if I go trade. Oh, that's because they don't have anything in their inventory. We haven't added anything for them. So let's go with test 2 here. So we forgot to add something to test 2's inventory. So we'll say test 2 and we'll say ping RPC, which should be get or add item to inventory. That's my fault. So we'll do that. We'll close this and then we'll see if we refresh our storage here, we have 2 inventory items, right? Both assigned to different user IDs. So I'm going to say that this guy has a gun and the rarity is rare. Like that. We'll hit save and we'll just go ahead and modify that. So now if I refresh this guy, I can go test, get friends, trade, and I should have gotten back. Yep, I got back one of their inventory items. You can see right here, there's their sword. And then if I get my inventory, you'll see I have a gun. And that's basically how I could pull back both of our inventories. And now, once we have this, I can actually set up selecting and getting to ready to do an actual trade. So this should be pretty easy to do at this point. So much like how we bound the click event up here when we did our buttons, we're going to do the same thing right here. So basically, if we go ahead and say on trade friend, we go up here, you can see we're doing on trade.bind. So we basically need to take this guy here. Let's just copy this, bring this down here and say button down, connect. And then we're going to bind and pass in that inventory item. So we'll come down here. We'll create a func called set item for trade, like that. And I'll pass in the item, the button, the player, and then I will go ahead and do that. Now, when we do our bind here, we're going to bind in the button, comma, and true. Now, I'll explain why player is a Boolean, but just trust me for right now. So we could actually just go bool, and we could do colon button as well if we want to. Now, what we can do is we can come in here and say var items if player colon, and we'll need to keep track of what items are being traded for. So we'll say up here, we'll go var trade items is equal to bracket var items to trade for is equal to bracket var player to trade with, and then we will go ahead and do var current trade offer, like that. Now these guys should be at the top of the screen and we'll move those up there in a minute, but I just kind of want them to be there so I can take a look at them and have them there. So if our player is true, right? So if player items is equal to trade items, else items is equals to items to trade for. So basically, if this is a player object, oh, we need to make this a capital B button. If this is a player, so if the player is trading something, then we need to basically say, okay, we're trading this, we are the player, which technically I think this is our friend one, so this one would be false. And then if we copy this and we head up to our inventory one, we'll pass this as true, like that. So basically, if this is our items, right, if it's a player item, then we're going to set our items equal to trade items. That way we can add and delete from that. Else, if it's not, then we'll go ahead and not do that. More or less, we'll set it to our person we're trading with items. That way we can modify that stack. So it's a way for us to reuse a function and reuse the same code without needing to go in and duplicate our code and create some weird logic, if that makes sense. So if not items dot has item, then we'll go ahead. Whoops, that's C#. Then we'll go ahead and say items dot append. We'll pass in our item like that. And then what I'm going to do is I'm going to do a style box change just to make it look different. So I'll say var style box is equal to style box flat new like that. And I'll go style box dot bg color, and we're going to make that equal to color dot green like that to denote that it's selected. And then we'll say button dot add theme style box override, and we'll just pass in normal comma, and then we'll pass in our style box like that. Else, if we already have had it selected, we want to remove that from our list. So items dot erase, and we'll remove that item like that. And then we'll go ahead and do the exact same thing here, but instead we're going to go ahead and make it white like that, which means we probably will need to do that for when we spawn in our buttons as well. So right here where we spawn in our buttons, we probably want to add in a style box for that. But that's something that we can do later whenever we feel like it. And then we'll say if player colon trade items is equal to items, else items to trade for is equal to items like that. And technically we may or may not need this, but I'm going to do it this way just because I like to be safe and sure. So we'll go ahead and do that. So now that should just work for that. And then we'll go ahead and add in that style box. So we'll just grab this guy, copy, paste, and we'll come up here, paste, and there we go. So now if we hit play, you'll see when I log in as test, I get my friends, I trade with my friends. That is way too ugly for what I like. That's very bright. And if I get my inventory, you'll see that they're both white, which I'm not a fan of, so we'll have to fix that. And when you select it, it does nothing. So that's not a great sign. I do have potentially an error here. Error calling a button down from this expected 1 argument, but got called with 3. So if we take a look at these buttons, we are binding on trade, not our set item for trade. So we'll grab that. We'll go ahead and bind the proper function like that. And I'm going to actually kill this. I'm not a huge fan of that. So I'm curious if I could just instead, let's get rid of that. That's really ugly. And then we'll pass in null instead. And then let's just do that. Let's see if that works better. So I'm going to refresh this and see how that goes. So we'll go ahead and click submit. We're going to click get friends, trade. You'll see it's a nice dark like I like. And then we'll click gun, sword. We'll unselect. And unselecting doesn't seem to work. I am getting an error. Set item for trade condition is not valid. So we can't just set it to null. So what if I set it to a style box new? Does that make that work? Let's do that. And then let's see what happens if I just do that. I'm trying to find a good way to make this not look terrible, so forgive me. So we'll go ahead and do submit, get inventory. Gray looks okay, so we'll go get friends, trade, and then we'll click and click. click and click, and there we go. So now all we have to do is basically send that trade offer to our friend. So in order to do that, we just need to make a button. So we'll go out here. We will click on this guy. We're going to duplicate our get inventory, bring this down, and say send trade offer, like that. I'm going to copy that, Control A, V, space, and space. I'm going to go to my node. I'm going to disconnect that method, connect a new method, and I will go ahead and connect this. And now when you want to actually do an offer, all you have to do is say var receiver is equal to player to trade with, var offer items is equal to, I believe it's trade items. So trade items. And that's ver, not var. There we go. And then var requested items is equal to items to trade for. And then we'll create a trade offer. Now, we could just use an adapter function for this and actually have a separate function to handle this. But what I think we can do is just come in here and say var payload is equal to bracket quote, and we'll basically just come in here into our trade offer and see receiver ID, offer items, and requested items. So we'll say quote receiver ID colon receiver comma, and we should probably make this receiver ID like so. And then we'll grab the next one, offer items is equal to offer items. And we'll wrap that in quotes real quick. Quote, request items like so, colon, requested items like that. And then we'll say var result is equal to await client dot RPC async, much like we did before. And we'll pass in our session, comma, quote, and then we will go ahead and grab the create trade offer like so. So we'll do create trade offer, comma, JSON.stringify, and we'll pass in our payload like so. And now all we have to do is just print our response. So we'll say print result like that. Now, at this point, it should work, but we need to come in here and register our trade offer. So I'm going to duplicate this guy. So Control C, Control V. Going to do create trade offer, Control S. And then we will go ahead and reset our Nakama container. And then we'll reset it. And that is going to reset and load in our module. And then from there, hopefully, this will work. So we'll come in here. We will click on our test scene here. And we'll go ahead and reset. Now, if we log in, we click on get friends. We trade with them. We get our inventory. We select, send a trade offer. So you'll see that we did get an offer ID back. So that's good. That's a good sign. So now, if we go into Nakama, we go to our storage, you can see our trade offers. So you can see right here, if we format this, this has all of the information that we need. So we have the offer items, which items we're offering. So in our case, we're offering a gun for a sword. So we're giving them a really good deal, right? We're giving them a rare weapon, and we are getting a common weapon. And you can see that we have a sender ID and under user ID, which actually is all zeros. So something probably broke right here. So that's not great. But the question is, when we selected our person, did we set them as the person that we're trading with? Do we actually set that? Because you can see we're doing player to trade with right here. And then here is the receiver ID. And that is it. So my guess is when we hit the trade button, if we go and search for that current button.text and we do that on trade bind right here, my guess is what's going on is that we're not setting that person as the current person to be traded with. So we'll set that. So current, or I guess it's player to trade with. So player to trade with is equal to friend, like that. And then we can go ahead and take a look at player to trade with, receiver ID, so .id, and I just deleted a bunch of code, so there we go. We'll bring this over, .id, and hopefully that will work. So I'm going to drop a breakpoint right here, and I'm going to go ahead and submit, get friends, trade, get my inventory, gun, sword, send trade offer. Let's see what our player to trade with ID is. It's not that, so that's not good because you can see invalid index ID. So let's see what player to trade with looks like. So we'll take a look at the object here. And I clicked the wrong button, I think. There we go. So player to trade with right here. Let's take a look at it. It's going to be .user.id, it looks like. So .user.id. So now let's refresh that bad boy and let's try it one more time. So we'll hit submit, get friends, trade, get inventory, gun, sword, send trade offer. We'll step over and it should be working. So we'll let that resume. We'll go back to our Nakama console. Let's take a look at our storage and we have a trade offer for that person. Now I'm going to delete this trade offer. There's no point in having it, but this one has the proper information. You can see it has the person that we're trading with right here, we're trading to, and then we have where it came from right here. So that's perfect. And you can see our status is now pending. So awesome. We have our trade offer. So now we have to be able to accept that trade and possibly reject that trade. So how can we actually approach that? So in order to accept a trade offer, we need to actually build out all of the code that's associated with that. So if we go to the trade system here, we're going to collapse this guy, give ourselves a bit more space here. We can go function. And for the function name, what we can do is we can call it accept trade offer. And then we can come in here and say local. And we can pull our user ID and our trade offer ID. So we'll just grab these three like this, copy and paste. And then what I'm going to do is I'm going to say ID, and then I'll do data. And then for here, I'll just do offer ID. And then we'll do data dot offer ID like so. And that should work for this. And now what I'm going to do is I'm going to do a little bit of error checking. So if not offer ID, then, and we'll just pass in error, offer ID is required. That way we have some kind of basic ability to do error checking. And now I'm going to go and read that trade offer. So local result is equal to nk.storage underscore read bracket bracket, and I'm going to create an object. So I'm going to go bracket collection is equal to quote trade offer comma key is equal to offer ID comma user ID is equal to user ID, like that. And I believe it's actually user underscore ID for Nakama. So we will go ahead and do that. Now, once we have that, then we can check to see if we got anything back. So if pound result is equal to 0, then error. And then for our message, we'll just pass in invalid trade offer or processed already, like that. That way we have some kind of error that we can work with. And then what we'll do is we'll go ahead and pull back that offer. So local trade offer is equal to result bracket bracket 1 dot value. So it's going to return a value of some description. So you can see it's going to return a list of objects. And basically, we're going to pull back that first element. And in Lua, indexes start at 1 instead of 0. So we start with 1. And we're going to pull back that value here. So we're going to pull back that data. And then we'll say local sender ID is equal to trade offer dot sender ID, like that. And my guess is my trade offer is going to be, if we take a look at it, it is a lowercase ID, sender ID. So that works perfectly. And then I'm going to go local receiver ID is equal to trade offer dot receiver ID, like that. And we will double check really quick, make sure that that's correct. Receiver ID, so that works. So paste and paste, that works. And then I'm going to say if trade offer dot status is equal to tilde equals to quote pending, then we're going to pass back an error, because if the trade offer is not pending, then we don't want to use it, right? So trade offer is not pending. And there we go. And then we'll come in here and we'll basically move one item to another person. Now, this is where things are going to get complicated. We're going to do a sub function inside of here so that we don't need to duplicate code, because what we're going to do is basically when we want to transfer data from one person to another, we need to loop through our items, loop through their items, and then transfer those items to each other. So it's going to be better off for us to build a function to handle that. So instead of making it a function that's outside of the scope of this function, I'm going to make a function in a function. So what we'll do is we'll just build that function. So local function transfer item, like that. And then we'll come in here, we'll pass in the item ID from user ID, comma, to user ID, like that. And we'll add our end. And then we're going to want to log some of this data, right? Because we don't want to allow us to not know who's transferring data to who. So nk.logger underscore info will pass in transfer item from ID colon space dot dot to string item ID. And then we're going to paste it 3 times and we'll say from user ID to user ID, and we'll pass in our from user and our to user, like that. And then we're going to do some error checking. So we'll say if not item ID or type item ID squiggle equals quote string, then error item ID must be a valid string. And then we should probably do the same thing for everything else, right? Because this is going to be a function that's going to be used, right? So we want to make sure that our stuff is valid and good, right? So from user ID must be a valid string. And then we'll do the same thing here. To user ID must be a valid string, like that. Then we can come in here and we can actually go and objects that we're trying to transfer. So we'll come in here and we'll say local item result is equal to nk.storage read bracket 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 collection is equal to quote inventory, comma key is equal to item ID, comma user underscore ID is equal to from user ID. And you should probably check if that object is in the person's inventory before you start moving it around. So if $item result is equal to 0, then we know that that item's not there, right? So we'll say error. Item is not found in sender's inventory, and then we'll go ahead and end. And then we'll say local item data is equal to item result bracket 1 dot value. Now remember, Lua does everything with an index of 1. So we're checking if we have anything in that list, and that list should be a size of 1, because when we look up the item ID and the user ID, that relates to one single key in that database. So it should never have more than 1. So that's why we're only checking for equals and not, greater than or something like that. Then we can basically delete that object. So we can say nk.storage delete, and I'm just going to grab basically this little bit right here. So we'll just paste. There we go. And then we'll come in here and say local storage object is equal to bracket. And we're going to basically store that in the other person's inventory, right? So we're going to say collection is equal to quote inventory, comma, key is equal to item ID, comma, user ID is equal to our to user ID, comma, and then value is equal to item data. So all this is doing is it's literally passing all of the data from one user to another and then deleting it out of the other user's inventory. And that's all it's doing. And then we'll come in here and say nk storage write, and we're going to store that storage object like that. And that'll basically do that. And now all we have to do is transfer the data from each other's inventories, right? So this function is going to serve as a way to transfer that item, but we need to actually use that function for it to work. So what we'll do is we'll loop through all of our items, providing that I can find, if I remember correctly, item ID in I pairs, and then we'll pass in trade offer dot offer items like that, do, and we'll just say transfer items, and we'll pass in our item ID, comma, sender ID and receiver ID. And then I'm going to grab this guy, copy it, paste it, and then I'm going to flip sender ID and receiver ID like that. So all this is doing is it's using this function up here that I just built. It's going to use this function, and it's going to take all of sender's stuff into receivers and all of receiver stuff into sender. So it's literally flipping the items into people's inventory, and that's it. And now we need to set the inventory, the trade offer status as accepted. So trade offer dot status is equal to quote accepted, and then we need to write that that has been completed. So we'll say nk.storage write bracket collection is equal to trade offers, comma, key is equal to offer ID, comma, user ID is equal to user ID, comma, and then value is equal to trade offer like that. And then finally, we need to return some kind of status. So we'll return nk.json encode, and I'm going to pass in result is equal to quote trade offer accepted like that. So that way we know that the trade offer was accepted. And that's basically how we're going to translate all of that data, how we're going to do our switching between the two people, if that makes sense. So basically how it operates is pretty simple. We pass in the trade offer that we want to accept. We go through, we select the data from the database. We select that trade offer from the database. Then we come in here and we say, for everything that's in the trade offer for the items that are going from the sender, put it in the receiver's inventory. And that's basically what this is doing, is it's looping through each one of those objects, deleting it from the sender's inventory, and then putting it into the receiver's inventory. And then it's doing the exact same thing, but the opposite for the receiver's inventory. The receiver is sending all the data into the sender's inventory and deleting it out of the receiver's inventory. That way the trade gets accepted and completed. And then we set our trade offer status as accepted, and then we write that to our database saying that that trade offer is completed. So now we can't accept it a second time. There's no way to duplicate items or, cause any issues there. So it's pretty simple. And now we need a way to actually fetch that trade offer, right? Because accept trade offer takes in an ID. So we need some way to say, hey, let's get that pending trade offer, right? So what we'll do is we'll build a quick function for that. So we'll say function get trade offers, like that. We'll pass in our context and our payload just like we always do. Now this is going to be really easy, because to get trade offers, we basically need to do really exactly what we did with our get our inventory right here. Literally this, just slightly different. So I'm basically going to duplicate this code, and I'm going to say context user ID. That's fine. The data, really, we're not going to use this, but I'll keep that for now. I'm going to do user ID instead. And instead of inventory, we're going to go trade offers, like that. And I'm going to call this trade offers, like so. And I'm going to say inventory instead. So we're going to get rid of those and make those trade offers. And then I'm going to say, instead of just looping through it, I'm going to say if results and # results greater than 0, then we'll pass in that. We'll grab this guy, Control X, paste. And I'm going to do for underscore objects and pair results. And I'm going to go ahead and check if obj.value.status is equal to, quote, pending, then we will go ahead and do this. And that's going to make it so that we only get back the pending objects. We don't get back all of the objects. We only get back the pending ones that matter. And then if our results is not greater than 0, then we know that we don't have any trade offers. So we can go ahead and log that. So else nk.loggerinfo, no trade offers found for user ... user ID, like that. And then we can return that JSON encoded object. And now all we got to do is register our 2 additional functions with Nakama. So we'll go ahead and do that real quick. And then we basically should be good to at least get somewhere with our trade system. And now that we have it registered, we just need to basically reset this, and it should come in and be good to go. So we'll let that run through, and we'll hit up Docker Compose. And it should show up in our Nakama console in about 2 seconds. And now we can come in here and basically accept our trade offer. Now, unfortunately, that means we got to create a bunch of new buttons, right? First, we have to load that trade offer, right? And then we need to come in and basically have an interface to select that trade offer, right? And then we need to be able to actually accept trades. So let's head back over here and let's come up with a way to handle this. So first things first, I'm going to duplicate, drag this down, duplicate, drag this down, and I'm going to call this one get trade offers, and then accept trade offer, like that. And I'm going to grab this, Control C, paste, spacebar, and then we'll come in here, do the same thing, copy, paste, spacebar. There we go. I'm going to come in here and disconnect this guy, connect it, select this guy, disconnect, double click, connect, and that will create those 2 function calls right there. Now, in order for us to actually get our trade offers, all we need to do is basically go into that RPC call. So what I think we should do is we should abstract get trade offers to be its own function, because there's always the need for a separate function for this capability. So I'm going to come down here and just say func get trade offers like that. And I'm going to pass in nothing because there's no need to pass in anything. And all I'm going to do is I'm going to do exactly what I've done for this and basically this entire video, which is we're going to grab our trade offers. We'll just grab that right there. We'll just paste and we'll say var result client asynchronously. And we will go ahead and instead of doing stringify this, we'll just pass in an empty string right here because we don't need anything. We're not passing anything in. And we'll just go ahead and grab our trade offers. So get trade offers. We'll just paste that bad boy in there. And then we can basically just go and parse through that data. So we'll say var trade offers is equal to JSON.parse string RPC result dot payload like that. And that's going to get back those trade offers. And then all I'm going to do is I'm just going to return trade offers like that. And that basically just gives us a function that we can work with here. So now whenever we want to get our trade offers for whatever reason, we could always just go fetch it. But when we press this button down, we want to populate some kind of interface to handle our trade offers. And we're kind of running out of space here. So I feel like we almost need to expand this little box here. I'm going to make it a touch bit bigger like this. And then I'm going to grab these panels like this, and we'll just kind of move this over. So it'll give us a bit more space and a bit more to work with. And then I'm going to right click, add a child node. We'll add in a secondary panel like so. And then we'll make it about this big, give or take. And I'm going to put a title on top of this. I'm going to name this trade offers. And I'm going to right click, add a child node. Let's add in a label. And we'll just kind of bring it up. I know you're not supposed to do that, but it's fine for now. It's good for just the tutorial, but I wouldn't do my user interfaces this way. But we'll put trade offers, and then what we'll do is we'll basically put, just like we did before, a VBox container inside of here. Now, technically speaking, since we're only going to have one trade offer, it's not really that big of a deal if we just had it as, you know, one simple box that just populated, or maybe if we just click get trade offers, it would just populate the one, right? But in this case, we should probably make it at least a little bit scalable. So we'll go with that. Now I'm going to come back here and I'm going to say var trade offers is equal to get trade offers like that. And then we'll say for I in trade offers, I'm going to go ahead and do what I've done for a while as well, which is create a button. So we'll say var button is equal to button.new like that. And then we'll say var ID is equal to await. And now, since we have a button, we need to populate it with some information, right? And unfortunately, right, we can't just use the trade ID because the trade ID doesn't have any of that, right? So what we could do is we can get back the sender ID and then fetch the user's information. And so that's what I'm going to do. I'm going to say var ID is equal to await client dot get users async, and I'm going to pass in my session, comma, bracket, I dot sender ID. I believe it's lowercase ID, so we'll pass in sender ID, comma, null, like that. And then I can come in here and say button dot text is equal to ID users bracket 0 dot display underscore name like that. And we'll need to await for this coroutine to finish. So make sure we do that. And then basically we're going to set our button text equal to our trading offered user's name. So we'll basically pull back our user's sender information and then get their data. So that way we can display their name so the person knows who's trying to trade with them. And then we'll say button.buttondown.connect. And I'm going to create a function called set trade offers.bind, and I'm going to bind I. And then I'll come in here and I'll hit $ trade offers VBox container dot add child, and we'll pass in button like that. Now, set trade offers is not created, so we'll have to create that, right? So that's basically just something that actually set trade offers, send trade offer. Let's take a look at this. Set item for trade. Don't think that's going to work. On trade is a friend, and that loops through and gets their information. I feel like we're going to need a function. So we'll create a function. So we'll say func set trade offers, and we'll pass in an offer. Okay. And basically all this is going to do is it's just going to loop through the trading panel and then populate it. So I feel like we could do a little bit of change here to make this a little bit better. But for I in offer dot request items colon, and then we basically can just say var button is equal to button.new, button.text is equal to I.name, then $ VBox container dot add child. We'll pass in that button. And then we're basically going to do the exact same thing, but for the offer items. Like that. And then I'm going to go ahead and change this from VBox container to VBox container 2. And in theory, that should work. So, and then we'll need to set our current trade offer equal to our offer, like that. And in theory, that should work. So basically, all this is doing is just loading a trade offer that didn't exist before and just basically making it so it does exist now. Now, something that we should do is we should probably grab these two objects here and delete their children. And in order to do that, I'm going to create a function for that. So func remove my children, and I'm just going to pass in a node. And I'm just going to say for I in node.get children, like so, I.q underscore free, like that. And that'll basically just remove that child node. So I think that should work. I don't like that it's not auto completing Q free. So it kind of scares me. Q underscore free. There we go. I just want to make sure that I spelled it right because I'm horrific at spelling. And then basically we could just come in here and say remove my children, and then we can just pass in these objects. So we'll pass in this guy, copy, paste, Control C, Control V, and paste. And basically that's just going to allow us to remove the children of these objects before we populate it with new objects, just in case somebody causes some issues. And same thing when we get our inventory. So if you remember, we pull back our inventory right here-ish. Let me see. Right here, we get back our inventory. So we can really just paste this and then just grab this guy, copy it, paste it, and then do the exact same thing down on my trade right here and just remove this guy's children as well. And there we go. And that'll allow us to just kind of delete all the children. So that way all of our UI elements are flexible enough to actually work properly. So now, in theory, this might work. Maybe. We'll try it. So we'll refresh, and then we'll go in here. We'll do test 2. We'll submit. We will get our trade offers, and we have a completely broken object. Get trade offers is nil, so that's not good. The question is was the trade offer for that person? So 67C3, if we take a look at our admin, yes, so this was for that person, so 67C3, so that should have worked. But get trade offers got back nothing. It's got back a null object. So that's not a good sign. So let's see why it only got back nothing. So let me go here. Let's refresh. Let's try that one more time. So we'll go ahead and hit test 2, submit, and get trade offers. So we're going to take a look at our result. Let's see what we got. We got an exception. Bad argument 1, expects JSON string. So we definitely got an error within our Lua code. So the question is, what blew up? So if this is empty, is it mad because of that? Expects JSON string. Let's take a look at this guy and let's see. Is there any errors in here? Error reading message from client, TCP, timeout, RPC function error, bad argument on Lua line 150. So if we take a look, you can see right here, it says it right here, Lua 150. Bad argument. So if we take a look at 150, JSON decode payload. So that payload, since it's an empty object, it's not handling it very well. So what I think we'll do is I'll just pass in an empty JSON object. So bracket, bracket, see if that will work instead. Maybe that will solve our problem here. So we'll go ahead and log in as test 2, submit, get trade offers. Did it come back with data? No, maybe. Yes, it did. Cool. So we'll pass that in, and you can see we now have our trade offer. If we hit click test, we have an error now as well. So that's unfortunate, but let's see what we have. So offer is a dictionary, so that's good. Offer.requested, requested items, not request items, so requested items. That works. And then let's just make sure that our offer items is correct. It looks like it is. So we'll refresh that once more. We're going to go test 2, submit, get trade offers, test, and we have our trade offer. Awesome. So now we have that trade offer loaded into memory, right? We can see our 2 objects and we're good to go. And we can actually click on them and it does nothing. But if we wanted to, we could create a panel to handle that, right? We could create a panel to kind of show the user information or to show the information that we're looking for, because all of that information actually comes back, right, in our current offer. So that's kind of the really cool part about this. So let's say I accept that trade offer. If I click accept, did it work? Well, that's a good question, because to be honest with you, I'm not sure, because we didn't really get any logs back or anything like that. So let's take a look at our log here. So you can see it says cleaned up connection. Let's see, WebSocket, persistence. I'm not seeing any errors. New WebSocket connection, cleaning up that. We got a debug here. So let's take a look at our Nakama console. Let's refresh on this offer. It is still pending. So something broke. Something somewhere is mad. So that's unfortunate, but that's okay. That's to be expected. So let's take a look at our debugger. Do we have any errors? We don't. Let's see. So when we click accept trade, oh, that's because we didn't even set up accept trade offer. So that's my fault. So no wonder why it didn't do anything, right? Because we didn't actually code that section. For some reason, I thought we did. So when we want to accept a trade offer, it's actually super, super easy. All we have to do is create that payload that we wanted to do. So var payload is equal to bracket quote offer ID. And I believe it's, we look at our code here, it is going to be trade offer decode data.id So this will be the trade offer. So it's just going to be ID, it looks like. So we'll go with ID, colon, and we need to get our offer ID. So our offer ID, if you remember, if we find this, we have our current trade offer. So we'll say current trade offer dot, and if we take a look at our Nakama console here, it should just be dot ID. Let me make sure. Format offer ID right here. So we'll say offer.offer ID, and that will set up that offer ID to be correct. And then we can say var result is equal to await client.rpc async, and we'll pass in our session and then accept trade offer, json.stringify, payload. And then we'll want to parse that result. So var response is equal to json.parseString result.payload, like that. And then we could probably just print something like accepted trade offer plus response. And that should pretty much do it for us. Now, this most likely will work, but I want to make sure that I'm not absolutely crazy. So let's take a look really quick. So I feel like this should be offer ID, but in our trade offer section, we have data.id, which is our offer ID. So I think that that's acceptable. I think this will be okay. So let's go ahead and try it. So we're going to refresh and we will try it. So we're going to go in here, test 2, get our trade offers, test, and accept. Well, we got a error here, but it's just string and nil. So let's take a look at our result. Our result has an error. It's an exception of some kind. Offer ID is required. So we got a human readable error, so that's cool. But offer ID is required. We wrote that. Let's see. Offer ID is required right here. If not offer ID. So it's looking for data.offer ID. I thought it was offer ID. I don't know. Oh, I was reading a different function. That's why we're running into this. Okay, so offer ID. So it is offer ID. So we'll go ahead and put that in here, and we should be able to try that. So let's refresh, test 2, submit, get trade offers, select that trade offer, accept. And we got another exception, invalid trade offer or processed already. So that's not great, but it's not the end of the world. So first things first, offer ID, FECE9. So if we take a look, FECE9, so it's the correct trade offer. If we refresh this, it's still pending. So that's good news. FECE9, user ID is the proper user ID, so that should be fine. So our result was 0 when we did our select statement. So the question is, why? Trade offers, trade offer. This is trade offers, so that's why. The trade offers instead of trade offer. So let me take a look to see if I've made that mistake anywhere else. Trade offers. Let's look for trade offer. We'll hit Control F, and I'm going to make it the full size. Okay, so that should be good. So let's try that. And I'll have to reboot Nakama real quick, which is fine. So we can go ahead and do that. And then we'll reset it like that. So that way it just reloads that little change that we had. That was a misspelling on my part. So we'll try that one more time. So we'll go ahead and log in with test 2. We'll go ahead and get trade offers, select that trade offer, and then accept it. Now, once again, we're getting a nil object, so that's not great. We have another exception. Item ID must be a valid string. So our item ID is not a valid string. So that leaves me to believe that we probably have another misspelling somewhere in our code. So let's take a look. So if I look at this, transfer ID from table this. So right here, we're passing in a table. So the transfer item is a table object, not the actual ID. You can see here from user to user, but transfer item ID is wrong. So something in here is unhappy with the table. We're passing in a table for our item ID. So the question is, if we take a look at this, when we're passing in our item ID, what is that? My guess is it's going to be offer items item ID. Instead of being item ID, this is probably just the actual item itself. It's probably just item, right? And then we probably have to do dot, and let's take a look at our Nakama object ID. We probably need to do dot ID. Now, the reason why I'm making that assessment is because if we're going to be pulling back this list of objects and we're iterating through this list of objects. So we're passing in this entire object. We're not just passing in the ID, and that's my guess. So I'm going to do this on a whim and we'll see if this works. So I will reset this and be right back. All right, and if we go ahead and test this, let's come in here, refresh this guy. Test 2, submit, get trade offer, select, there's our trade offer, accept. Well, we still got a nil, so that's not great. Item ID must be a valid string. So it's not a valid string still. Did it not take my update? Let me see. Transfer item ID, this guy, so it's correct now to this guy. From this guy, transfer item. Oh, I see. So you can see here, we didn't update the other one. That was my fault. So that means that the object, I'm going to have to completely change how this operates here. I'm going to have to re-add an item to our inventory, but that's okay. So we'll go ahead and do this, and we'll go ahead and grab this guy and paste. Okay, hold on. I think I found, this says offer items. This should be request items, if I remember correctly. So requested items, because we're requesting the items, not just offering them. So this might be why we're running into this issue. So let's go ahead and save this. I'm going to reboot this guy and I will be right back. All right, so now that we have it rebooted, hopefully this will actually solve our problem. So let's come in here, refresh, and let's try this hopefully the last time. So test 2, submit, get trade offers, select it, accept. It's still mad, but we did get back a payload, trade offer accepted. So that's good. Okay, so we got something, right? I feel like I need to do response dot result maybe, and that would give me back my data. But that should have worked. So now if I hit get inventory, it should say gun. And if I log in as test 1 here, so if I select the other guy and I sign in as test and then I get inventory, did it come back as nothing? That's not what I expected. If I log in as test 2 here, and I get inventory, it also comes back with nothing. So, okay. So at least there's that. If we take a look at our Nakama stuff, it says that the status is pending still. Did the guys' stuff switch? No, it all went to 0. So since all of these guys are being zeroed out, I'm thinking that somewhere in here, when we're doing our trade, yeah, see, we have this. So I think part of the issue is a misspelling somewhere on my part. So I'm going to come in here and say to user ID, because that's the user ID that we use to determine who actually owns that object. If we take a look at our inventory here, you can see when we do this trade offer, it says The user ID is 67C3, and that is the receiver ID. So I'm going to say that's the 2 user ID because that's the receiver. So let me double check really quick. No, that should be user ID because, yeah, that should be user ID because that's how it exists. This isn't going to be here unless this needs to be underscore. I think this needs to be user underscore ID. I think that might be where our issues are running into, is right here. And then let's double check in here. We're also using user underscore ID. We are, so that should be fine. From user ID, from user ID. And when we write that new changeover, restore read storage, we're creating a new one to user ID, user underscore ID, like that. I think that that's where our issue is that it's not actually throwing any errors because Lua doesn't really care about case sensitivity or even if an object is initialized. So my guess is that that's what it's doing. The objects aren't initialized, so therefore it's just throwing a 0 instead of throwing an error to try to keep the program running, which is good for stability, but it's not good for us when it comes to actually making something that works. So we'll come in here. We'll go ahead and go into trade offers. I'm going to delete that trade offer. Go to inventory. And I'll probably, actually, you know what? I'll probably just delete it all because it's not worth, potentially having an issue here. So I'll just delete everything in here. And then we'll just rebuild from the ground up. So let's recreate this entire thing here. So we'll go ahead and say submit test2 submit. We will add an item to each other's inventory. We'll come in here, refresh. We'll grab this guy. We'll give them a different one. So gun, and we'll give them a rarity of rare, like so. We'll save that just so that we have a different object than the other guy. And we'll say get friends, trade, get trade. I want to trade a sword for a gun. Send that trade offer. We'll go ahead and get my trade offer right here. And we will go ahead and accept that trade offer. So now if we come in here and we take a look at our storage, everything maintains its user ID. So that's good. We took a look at our trade offer. It is accepted. So that's good. That's a good sign. If we come into these guys and we get our inventory, we now have a gun. If we get this guy's inventory, we now have a sword. So they did switch. So if I close both of these and I click on this guy and I hit play, let's try this one more time. If I log in under test, I get his inventory. He now has a gun. If I go to test 2 and I get their inventory, which of course I broke it because I can't log in under 2 users, but it looks like it did switch over. So that's pretty much how we can make a trading system. Now we need the ability to cancel a trade offer. So we'll need to figure out how to do that as well. So in order to cancel a trade, what we need to do is we need to actually create the Lua script first. So let's head out to our little Lua script here and let's say function, and we'll call it cancel trade offer, like that. Then we'll pass in our context and we'll pass in our payload. Now, when we want to cancel a trade offer, we're basically going to treat it exactly like we treat accepting a trade offer, right? So we come in here and we literally have our offer ID, our user ID, and our data, right? You can see that we do a storage read and we read that trade offer, right? And then we come in here, we flip all of our stuff, and then we change the status to accepted. So we're basically going to do the exact same thing. So we're going to grab all of this code here. We're going to come down here, paste it, and then we're going to grab this, copy, and come down here and paste. And then all we have to do is say, hey, if the status is pending, then the status is now canceled, like that. And that's really all we have to do. And then we're going to go ahead and commit it. And then we'll say trade offer canceled, like that. Now, the question that you might be asking yourself is, okay, hold on. So it's literally the same thing. But what if I want to, and then of course we have to register it, by the way. But what if I want to go in here and have the person that sent the trade offer to cancel it, right? So what happens if me as the sender says, hey, hold on, I no longer want to do that trade? Well, all we have to do is we need to store 2 trade offers, 1 for each side. And then we need to cancel 2 trade offers and update 2 trade offers, because the stuff needs to stay connected to the, we take a look at the storage objects here. So I'll refresh this, which of course Nakama's going to get mad at me. So I'll go ahead and do that. So if we take a look at our storage objects, you'll see that a trade offer houses a user ID. So that means that we need to almost duplicate the trade offer for it to exist on both people's stuff. So that way we can fetch that data back. So what we'll do is we'll come in here into our Lua script here, and we'll come up here and we'll go under create trade offer. And when it does this little store object right here, I'm going to copy this, paste, and I'm going to say storage object is equal to a new object, right? So we'll have this, we're going to write it, and then we'll have this one. We, instead of doing receiver ID, we'll say sender ID like that. And then that will basically duplicate this. And then all I have to do is I have to come down here when we update our storage to accepted like this. We'll just come in here, copy, paste, and then instead of passing in the user ID, we can just pass in the trade offer dot, if we can find it, result value. So trade offers right here. And if we take a look at the object itself, it's going to be something like trade offer dot sender ID. So we have the user ID, which is the receiver ID, and then we have the sender ID. So I'm basically going to go in and update this trade offer on both sides. So it's going to go in, it's going to update them and handle it from there. And then I'm going to do the same thing, but for cancel. So I'll come down here. I'll grab this guy, copy, paste, and then instead of user ID, I'll say trade offer dot receiver ID. And that should give us pretty much everything that we need. Well, technically I have the receiver ID right here as well. So I really could just say receiver ID and that would work, but I'll go ahead and just use it like this. So that's basically how we can do that. Now, when we want to get our trade offer, if we come in here, this allows us to fetch back our trade offers, right? So now that it's getting created for both, it should just work. So we'll come in here, we'll do this, we'll hit play, like so. We're going to go into test. We'll get our friend, we'll trade with our friend, we'll get our inventory. We're going to trade our gun for their sword. We'll send that trade offer. So you'll see test 2, submit, get trade offers. There's test, right? And if we get our trade offers, we don't have one. So that's not good. Let's take a look at our storage. We should have 2 trade offers. I'm only seeing 1 of the 2. You can see how it says user ID. So that is because we forgot to, or at least I forgot to, let's delete that trade offer. I forgot to submit the code to Nakama. So let's go ahead and do that real quick. So we'll cancel that. We'll come down here. We'll Control C, kill our Nakama container, and then we'll rerun that Docker container because that's going to go ahead and compose that. And it should add the new method into our Nakama container. So now we can come in here, submit, get inventory, get friend, trade. We will do this, send a trade offer. So that's going to send it out to them. And if we get our trade offers, well, it didn't do what I expected. So that's not a good sign, but let's take a look at our trade offers. We do have 2 of them, but they're under the wrong user ID. See right here? This one is under the same user ID. So we have 2 trade offers under the same user ID. And then we have one off on its own with a 000. So something here is a little bit funky. If we take a look, that one's a pending one. This one is a pending one. This is an accepted one. So my guess is this one was supposed to go to my user, but it seems to be that something is broke with our trade offer. So let's take a look at it real quick. If we head over here, create trade offer, we have trade offer, offer receiver ID, local storage user ID, receiver ID, data.sender ID. Sender ID is equal to user ID. So that's where it's upset. So this needs to be user ID, not sender ID. So that's my fault. So we'll go ahead and kill this one more time. And now we'll come in here. We'll go back here like this. We'll go into our test scene. We'll kill this, come in here and get rid of these two trade offers because I'm just going to reset them. There's no point in having them here if they've been already existing. And I'll even delete that trade offer. That way we just have everything empty. And we'll come in here and hit play, submit, get friend, trade, get my inventory, select the two, send a trade offer, and then let's see. We have two trade offers with different user IDs. So now if I come in here and I get my trade offers, you can see there's the trade offer. Now, if I click accept, it probably will accept that trade offer. So if we click that and then I get my inventory, well, it didn't actually. Let me take a look. Status accepted. Status pending. But did it duplicate it? I'm curious if it actually went through with it. Weapon, sword. This is associated with player 1. So this never actually switched because we did sword for gun, if I remember correctly. If I take a look at the trade offer, it's going to be requested item, sword, status accepted, offer item, gun. So the other user, well, we're not going to allow them to accept that trade offer anyway. So I'm going to need to come in here and clean this up because they can't just accept a trade offer like that. So we'll come in here to our trade system here. And where it says accept trade offer, we'll pull back our trade offer and we'll come in here and say if trade offer dot sender ID, or I guess receiver ID, because it's going to be the person that received the trade offer has to accept, does not equal user ID, then we need to say error, trade offer cannot be accepted by sender. And that's going to stop them from being able to do that. So now if I come in here and I trash this trade offers like so, and then I come in here, reset this bad boy. And while this is resetting, let's come in here and let's add in a new button. So we'll add in one more new button and we're running out of storage space here, but we'll see if we can pull it off. Let's grab this guy, bring it forward up here like so, grab this guy, pull it up like so, because we're running out of space here. So this will probably have to just hang off the edge. Maybe. No, because we can just grab our entire trade system, pull it up like so, grab our little panel here and expand it. And for this accept trade offer, we're going to say cancel trade offer. And we'll change that to cancel trade offer. And that's not the correct one, but that's fine. It should be fine. So we'll come in here, right click disconnect, right click connect, and we'll connect it. Now, in the meantime, I'm going to come in here and Docker compose up. So that way our Docker container gets up there. And when we want to cancel a trade offer, we need to go in and actually cancel that trade offer. So when we select that trade offer, much like how we have accept trade offer, it's the exact same thing. So when we do this, we just copy this bit of code here, come down here, paste it, offer ID is equal to that, session, cancel trade offer instead. So we'll come in here to our trade offers, scroll down, grab cancel trade offer, paste it, and then canceled trade offer. Now I'll refresh this because Nakama should be good to go. We'll do test, get, test. So they have a gun, I have a sword, so I will get my inventory. I will select both of our trades, send that trade offer. We'll get that trade offer. We'll select it. You can see gun for sword. And then I will try to accept that trade offer, and you'll see that it's mad at me. It failed, but that's okay because that's what we expect. If we look at the payload, this is exceptioning because of how we have the setup. But you can see exception trade offer cannot be accepted by sender. So we really need to check for an exception. So we need to actually check if response and find, let's see, dot exception. Then we can print that exception dot message like that. Else we can just print this. And that should help with solving that issue. And now we should be able to hit play. And then what happens if we select and cancel? Does it actually cancel it? Or I might have gotten disconnected. It's possible. So we'll take a look. Status canceled. So it's been canceled. And if we hit back, status canceled because it updated both of them. See that? So both of these guys got updated because of the way our code works. And now if test 2 comes in and says, hey, I wonder if somebody's trading with me, you can see that it no longer comes up when I hit get trade offers. And they can't accept a trade offer from test. So if test selects both of these guys, so trade, get my inventory, select, and then I send a trade offer. When I get my trade offers, you can see here's my trade. When I get my trade offers, it's right here. And actually, I think it did not send anything in the trade offer. That's going to be a bug as well, because you can't send a trade offer without having some kind of data in it. You can see this is an empty trade offer. So that's also a problem. We're going to need to check against that to validate that they're not sending an empty trade offer. So that's something else that we need to check for. We need to do input validation there. So if I come in here where it says send trade offer, so this guy right here, instead of sending out the thing, when we build the payload, if offer items is equal to bracket, which means it's empty, right? Then print cannot send empty offer. And then same thing on the other end, cannot send empty offer. So I guess technically we could do this or this bit here like this. And then we could just return like so. And I guess Godot is probably, there we go. So that should work. And that should stop us from sending empty offers like that, because we don't want an empty offer if we can avoid it. So if we come in here, kill all of these offers, come in here, refresh, we can go test, get friends, trade, get my inventory, select, send a trade offer, test 2, submit, get trade offers. There's the trade offer. If I want to try to accept a trade offer, so get trade offers, select, and then hit accept, you'll see that we get an exception, which that's not good because for some reason, invalid index exception. So my guess is because it has an exception. Oh, it's in result, not response. That's why. I'm dumb. So it's result. That's why. Okay. I want to make sure I don't have any other error checking like that. That's going to brick me. I think we should be okay. So now if we go test, get trade offers, test, accept, it's going to come in here and get mad at me. And then of course, result.exception.message. So we'll try that one more time. So submit, get my trade offers, select, and accept. And you can see return response error code, trade offer cannot be accepted by sender. And there you go. Now we did get an error. So let's take a look at that. Error at line 0. That's because this failed to parse because the data that came back was bad. So if you wanted to, you could come in and adjust that so that it doesn't throw that error. That's up to you guys if you want to. Now we can also go to test 2, get trade offers, test, and accept. And you'll see that nothing crazy happened. Offer accepted, trade offer accepted. And everything just worked as expected. And at this point, you basically have the basis to create a relatively good trading system. So we went through how to create custom Lua scripts for your Nakama instance. We talked about how to interact with them with RPC. We talked about how to build a basic trading system. We talked about how to actually interact with your storage system inside of Lua using the Nakama storage system. And we talked about the safety and the importance of using a storage server-side solution to handle all of your inventory management. So if you like this video, go ahead and hit that like button. Hey, you know, if you dislike this video, go ahead and hit that dislike button because I am here to make content for you guys. This video was a viewer suggested video. So, hey, you know, if you have any suggestions, please leave them in the comments below or jump on my GitHub. Link is in the description and put in a ticket and I'll be more than happy to triage it and check it out and try to make a video of it in the future. And hey, if you have any questions or comments about anything in this video, please leave a comment below or jump on my Discord. Link is in the description and anybody there will be more than happy to help you out. But that is all I have for you guys today. So thank you so much again for watching and I will see you all next time. Thanks.